On the coast of British Columbia, there is a people whose name is a flood. 10,000 years ago, the ancestors of the WSANEC people tied their canoes to an arbutus tree on the summit of a mountain as the waters rose. When the flood receded, one man looked down and shouted, "Nakanet te WSANEC." It means, look at what is emerging. They named themselves the Emerging People. Their mountain, Lau Wellnu, means place of refuge. Grant Keddy, curator of archaeology at the Royal British Columbia Museum, confirmed geological evidence of a massive flood from the Fraser River in this exact region approximately 10,000 years ago, likely caused by an ice dam collapse. A people named themselves after a catastrophe, and geology says the catastrophe was real. Welcome to Beyond the Pillars. Here, we don't chase myths, we chase data. More than 200 cultures on every inhabited continent tell the same story. The world floods. A small number of survivors escape. A new civilization begins. The conventional assumption was that these are independent fantasies, shared only because floods are universal. But the details say otherwise. The oldest written version comes from Mesopotamia. Not one version, three. The Atra-Hasis epic, composed around 1800 BC, from older oral tradition, describes a divine council that tries plague, drought, and famine before resorting to the flood. The god Enki wants to save the hero but has sworn an oath of silence, so he whispers the warning to a reed wall. You cannot accuse a wall of breaking an oath. It's one of the most elegant plot devices in ancient literature. The Eridu Genesis, even older, names the hero Zusudra, king of the city of Shurpak. After the flood, he's granted eternal life and sent to Dilmun, the Sumerian paradise. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 11, the hero Utnapishtim releases 3 birds. The dove returns, the swallow returns, the raven does not return. Land has been found. This sequence appears nearly word for word in Genesis. These are not parallel inventions. The name trail is a fingerprint. Zusudra in Sumerian becomes Utnapishtim, in Akkadian becomes Arthas, and its an epithet becomes Ixaruth in Greek of Bucerus. Same hero, different centuries, different languages, same story. And here's the overlooked detail. Archaeologists have excavated the city of Shurpak itself. They found a flood deposit layer dated to approximately 2900 to 2850 BC. A real flood, at the real city, at the exact cultural horizon when the earliest flood texts were being composed. But the Mesopotamian Hebrew-Greek transmission chain cannot explain traditions that exist on the other side of the earth. The Blackfoot Nation of the North American Plains tells of a great flood after which the creator figure Napi gathers the survivors on a mountain. He produces water of different colors and tells each group to drink and speak. Every group speaks a different language afterward. An independent new world parallel to the Tower of Babel. Same structure, different continent, no documented contact. The Maya Popalva describes the flood sent by hurricane, heart of the sky. The English word hurricane derives directly from this deity's name. Every time a hurricane is named, the Mayan flood myth is invoked. In Peru, the Inca tradition of Unu Pakatuti translates as water that overturns the world. Vietnam alone has more than 300 distinct flood traditions spanning virtually every ethnic group in the country. And in Greece, after the flood of Deucalion, the survivors repopulate the earth by throwing stones over their shoulders. Each stone becomes a person. The myth encodes a linguistic observation. The Greek word for people, laoi, shares its root with las, the word for stone. The story is simultaneously mythology and ancient philology. Now, consider China. Chinese flood mythology is fundamentally different from every other tradition. Yu the Great is not a survivor, he is an engineer, a hydraulic specialist who channels the floodwaters into the sea over 13 years of continuous labor. When a 9th century Arab traveler discussed Noah's flood with the Chinese emperor, the emperor reportedly rejected the idea that such a flood could have reached China. The Chinese cultural response to the flood was not submission, it was mastery. And then the absences. Japan has no major flood myth. In the 19th century, Shinto scholars Hirata Atsutane and Motori Norinaga used this absence as a nationalist argument. Every other culture had flood stories, but Japan did not. Japan must be the highest land on Earth, closest to the heavens, the center of creation. They turned a missing myth into a supremacy claim. Egypt has no destructive flood myth either. The Nile flood was not a catastrophe, it was the annual deposit of fertile silt that made Egyptian agriculture possible. The inundation was celebrated as a divine blessing from the god Hapi. This confirms a pattern that rewrites the debate. Cultures mythologize floods as catastrophes only when floods are catastrophes for them. The myth tracks the geology. So what caused this? Not one flood, many. Between 14,500 and 6,000 years ago, global sea levels rose by approximately 120 meters. This was not gradual, it came in pulses. Meltwater Pulse 1A, around 14,500 years ago, raised seas by roughly 20 meters. Meltwater Pulse 1B, around 11,500 years ago, raised them by an estimated 25 to 28 meters. Then, 8,000 years ago, the Persian Gulf was completely submerged, an estimated 250,000 square kilometers of habitable land, a basin that may have supported human habitation for 100,000 years, drowned. And then something remarkable happened. Over 60 new archaeological sites appeared virtually overnight on the surrounding shorelines. Whole communities, fully organized, appearing precisely where the refugees would have fled. 12,000 years ago, the Bass Strait land bridge connecting Tasmania to mainland Australia disappeared beneath the waves. Aboriginal Australian oral traditions describe walking between Tasmania and the mainland on dry land. Geologist Patrick Nunn of the University of the Sunshine Coast has systematically verified these traditions. Aboriginal coast descriptions match submerged coastlines with sufficient accuracy for geologists to independently confirm the geology. These are the oldest empirically verified oral records on Earth. 10 to 12,000 years, 400 to 500 generations, transmitted without a single written word. This is not myth, this is archive. The Klamath people of Oregon maintain a taboo against looking at Crater Lake and preserve an oral tradition of the eruption that created it. Geology dates that eruption to 7,700 years ago. The Gugu Badhun of Queensland describe a volcanic event geology dates to 9,000 years ago. The conventional assumption was that oral traditions degrade into noise after 500 to 700 years. The evidence proves they can preserve accurate environmental data for over 10,000. And one researcher proposed a convergence point. Bruce Masse, an environmental archaeologist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, analyzed 175 flood myths worldwide and found that 14 independently describe a total solar eclipse during the flood. Cross-referenced with known eclipse dates, they converge on May 10, 2800 BC. He proposes an Indian Ocean asteroid impact generating a mega tsunami. His own words, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and we're not there yet. But 14 independent eclipses converging on a single date is not coincidence, it's data. 200 cultures, 6 continents, 300 traditions from Vietnam alone, a city with a real flood layer, a people who named themselves after the water. These stories are not fairy tales. They're the oldest data storage system humanity ever built. Compressed, encoded, transmitted across millennia in the only medium that could survive the collapse of everything else, the human voice. 10,000 years ago, an ancestor of the WSANEC stood on a mountain and watched the world emerge from water. He spoke, and the words survived longer than stone. The question is no longer whether these floods happened. Geology confirms they did. The question is what else was lost beneath the water that we've not yet found. Here at Beyond the Pillars, our mission is to move beyond speculation. Our ultimate goal is to fund AtlantisX buying a research boat to search the world for the true remains of Atlantis. Building this community is the first step. If you want to be part of this mission, subscribe to the channel and help us build the resources to find the truth. We're just getting started.